Happy 4th of July, everyone. This is Majority 54, but you got Ben Meiselas here instead of Ravi Gupta. He's on break. I'm joined, of course, by the one and only Jason Kander. Let's get right into it. Donald Trump spent Independence Day posting QAnon memes and amplifying extremist groups on his social media platform. We'll compare and contrast the posts by Trump to the very normal post by President Biden. Meanwhile, the Special Purpose Acquisition Company, or SPAC, set to merge with Donald Trump's social media company, Trump Media, just reached an $18 million settlement agreement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This as the Justice Department continues its criminal investigation into the conduct by this SPAC and Trump Media. And get this, Donald Trump is refusing to sign the settlement agreement as he wants to throw the SPAC under the bus. We'll break that all down. Cold water is thrown on Ron DeSantis, or perhaps Ron DeSantis loves just throwing cold water on himself. Get this, betting markets are giving California Governor Gavin Newsom, who isn't even running, better odds at winning the 2024 election than Ron DeSantis. I mean, folks, let's just face it. Ron DeSantis doesn't even know how to eat a pizza. So how did Ron DeSantis go from the right's quote unquote normal alternative to Trump to an even more fringe candidate? We'll discuss, and of course, we'll break down his pizza sniffing antics. Finally, we'll recap the Supreme Court decisions from last week, and we'll try to make sense of how a hypothetical case surrounding a fake gay couple from an entity that doesn't even make websites, that claims it was a website company, led to a ruling with massive implications. We've got an ambitious Majority 54 today. I think we can get through all of these topics, Jason Kander. A lot of topics.
Well, you know, when you bring in Ben, you tend to get like a little bit more content. I was looking at that one. I was like, oh, we have a lot more to say today, which maybe it just is, you know, the hangover from the holiday. But I think it's your great work. I'm not sure, so I'm excited.
Well, we'll see. You can give me a rating at the end of the pod. Okay. But let's talk about this July 4th. You know, because as I see the fireworks, as I see the American flag, you know, as I see these great symbols of America, I think about how these symbols have been co-opted. And we here at the MeidasTouch Network, I mean, you see, I've got the flag behind me. I've got a Constitution as well on that fireplace. It's hard to see. It's somewhere on the fireplace next to some of the children's books from some of my clients. And I love those children's books if people want to know why I have that on top of the fireplace. But you know, I think about how patriotism, I think about how symbols like our great Constitution have been co-opted by the right, you know, and I think it is time for Democrats. I think it was long past time, but for Democrats and just the pro-democracy movement in general to be okay with this, like love it. Let's talk about it, but not in a performative way. And I think that's the key, you know, that's the key distinction, right? You see on the other side, this performative patriotism, the performative holding the Constitution while they take away people's freedoms. They're talking about freedom while doing the exact opposite. So to me, it becomes a very potent political force. And I want to get your view of it when you actually marry the symbolism with the conduct. And it's okay, I think, for Democrats, and we should, pro-democracy in general, set aside Democrats saying, look, we love this country. There's a lot that we can do better. We too love the flag. We love the Constitution, but we're really doing things. Focus on our conduct, not just the symbolism. That was one of my 4th of July reflections.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because, like, I noticed on like my Instagram, I have friends from high school who are into this. I don't know if you've seen this, into the we're going to make July American Pride Month, which I guess is supposed to be like a reaction to June being Pride Month, right? So they're like, I guess somehow the opposite of LGBT pride is pride in America, which doesn't make a lot of sense because they're really not even on, I mean, it doesn't make sense, obviously, and it's kind of bigoted. But it made me think about how, what you're saying about how like the right tends to want to sell an idea of America that is like infallible. And it's like, you know what, we're gonna red, white, and blue everything, and everything is great. And then, but then I agree with you. The left should be coming from the point of view of like, hey, not everything is perfect, but what we can be patriotic about is the desire to make things better, and that like patriotism is largely about potential and passion for making things better. But then I see on social media, like from other people on the left, a sort of desire to pan patriotism and the 4th of July, and to spend the 4th of July exclusively saying all the things about America that they don't like, without adding in the part about, but I believe America can be this thing that it's supposed to be. And I just wanted to express, like, I have some discomfort with that, the idea of just being negative. And it kind of, it reminds me of like the kid in high school who was like, I'm gonna be contrarian all the time because I'm not exactly sure how to fit in. So like I'm just gonna hate everything. And it's like, well, that's not actually productive, you know? So I feel like there's a more nuanced middle, which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and look, some of the negativity is obviously rooted in periods of time in our history and certain things currently going on that are deeply, deeply problematic. Those are things that we absolutely need to confront. It's frankly why I've pretty much stopped my law practice and have become 100% fighting for our democracy here to correct those things, but to temporarily reflect as well on the fact that what we are fighting for is the dream about what our country can be, and trying
Right.
to perfect this union to me is ultimately a positive thing. You talk about some of these memes being posted. I saw this video going around on TikTok that's like, my pronouns are USA, and it's like, okay, well, what's your point? Okay,
Yeah.
yes, okay, you're obviously trying to hate on LGBTQ community, or a community of people who use certain pronouns, but like, can you just like stop? Like, I think in terms of our messaging, can you stop obsessing, please, right wing, on taking away people's freedoms and hate? Because when you look at what they talk about, there isn't anything that they're actually talking about for the American people. They're not talking about policy. They're not talking about jobs. They're not talking about the economy. They're not talking about seniors or students. They're not talking about any freaking issue. All they are
Mhm.
talking about on a holiday which they purport is their holiday to celebrate freedom. All they are talking about is mocking their fellow Americans and trying to take away people's freedoms and celebrating things that take away people's freedoms. That is not freedom. And that is something that collectively we should be saying over and over again. So when we talk about their leader, the MAGA Republican leader, Donald Trump, and we pull up what he's posting about, the reason that we do it is this is a reflection on what the modern day Republican Party has become. One of the lines that I like that President Biden says is, don't compare me to the almighty. Okay. This is
Mhm.
politics. Compare me to the alternative right now. If you compare me to the almighty, I'm never going to stack up. And I always think about that line when I see that politics is about a choice. And look, one of the things I respect and like about Majority 54, and what I think differentiates it from some of our other shows here on the MeidasTouch Network as well, is that while I think our other shows are critical of Democrats and critical of Biden in certain respects, sometimes Majority 54 is sharply critical in a way that I frankly disagree with. But that to me is what politics and discourse is all about. Like, I'm good with that type of criticism, but let's not forget the comparisons here, Jason.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like I tend to think of us as like willing to be skeptical, you know, and so it's interesting, like what you're talking about, like the sort of right wing. It's sad that there's two different versions of patriotism right now, right? But that the right wing version of patriotism being about really just about who you're against, you know, and then sadly sometimes the left wing response to that becomes against about who they're against. But I don't think that's the left wing version of patriotism. The left wing version of patriotism is about what we can be, right? And I was thinking about this yesterday. We did July 4th over at my brother's house. He has a nice house with a pool, so we had enough space. And it was it was the first July 4th of this Afghan family that my wife and I pretty well adopted into our family. That it was my translator's family, and I was a big part of bringing them over and out of Afghanistan. And they've been here for less than a month, and they get to celebrate July 4th. And so all 14 of them went over to my brother's house, and like it was cool, you know, like some of them speak great English, some of them are just learning, but everybody is saying, you know, happy 4th of July. And like on the drive out to my brother lives kind of out in the country. So on the drive out there, like I'm talking to my friend Raheem about like what he learned in his orientation classes this week at the resettlement agency. And he was learning about like religious freedom and freedom of speech and all this stuff. And so it was like a syrupy goodness of America sort of feeling, you know, like all the goods. And so the whole time I'm talking to him about, yeah, you know, that's one of the great things about this country, about how you can stand up and say things about the president, whoever the president is, and like they can't do anything to you. And of course, in my mind, I'm also thinking about some of the more critical stuff, the things we need to work on. But like, I'm also with my friend Raheem, who just got to America. So like, we don't need to get into the nuanced stuff. And then later in the night, like we're watching fireworks, and it's like, you know, there was a lot of Americana and it was really nice, but also sort of a forward looking, like inclusiveness. Like we went to this, my brother lives out in this small town, and we went to this like little parade, and, you know, it's all white people and my Afghan friends, and not all of them speak English. And like the women are wearing hijabs. And on the one hand, that was completely awesome. And on the other hand, I was thinking like, you know, I was feeling a little protective. Like, what are the people around us thinking? Are they going to say something, you know? And of course they didn't. And I should give them the benefit of the doubt. But that's sort of, I think, the nuanced nature of like living in America today,
If you
you
want to
know?
know how things have changed too, you know, I remember when I was in my litigation days, when I was representing Colin Kaepernick in the NFL case, one of the things that I was looking at was this report that was prepared by John McCain and Jeff Flake, both the late John McCain and Jeff Flake, both at the time senators of Arizona. And they wrote this report on paid patriotism, about all of the flyover stuff that occurs before the NFL football games begins, and all of the kind of military promoted accoutrements that have now become accepted practice at the game, but that wasn't always the case. And what Republican senators McCain and Flake argued was that the paid patriotism, the performative patriotism, was a waste of money, was
Mm-hmm.
problematic. That's what the Republicans were saying 15 years ago when they penned that report. They were
Yeah.
criticizing paid patriotism. The modern day Republican Party is basically propaganda undermining patriotism and calling it patriotism. But I wanted to put that footnote because that report always sticks with me. And you may have recalled that report as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, what gets me is like that was the beginning of the era, or maybe mid era, of red, white, and blue not being the only patriotic colors. That like woodland camo somehow has become a patriotic color. Like it's interesting to me that like a couple times a year, Major League Baseball teams just wear camouflage hats, and they make it like a you know, or like some of them do it on like 4th of July, and I'm like, that's not like an America color. That's like it's a war color, you know. And like I was in the army, like I obviously support the military, but like let's not cross the streams all the time, you know what I mean? It's not, it's, you know, one doesn't have to eat, like, to me, yes, of course, joining the military, I believe, is a very patriotic thing to do, but so is joining the Peace Corps. And like, so is becoming a firefighter or a teacher. And what's, I think, interesting in our culture right now is not what we meant to talk about, but, and I experienced this next thing I'm about to talk about a lot because, you know, I work in the veterans nonprofit world. And one of the things I do is I go into new communities, and I talk about building campuses, which always means you're going into a neighborhood, right? So you're meeting with neighborhood leaders, and I've been doing this for 4 years now, and just in that 4 years, culturally things have changed to where we were still close enough, I guess, to 9/11 to where, like, no matter what community you were going into, you didn't have to be a political leader. You could just be a local leader to sort of have this vibe that said, to receive this vibe that said, I can't really get up in a room and say I don't want homeless veterans in my neighborhood, right? And now I am experiencing more people who are willing to stand up and say, I'm not sure that I want this in my neighborhood. And I don't fault those people. What it leads me to understand is that military folks and veterans are settling back into a more natural place in the way they're held in regard in our society, which is, instead of being way up here on the highest platform, it's more like, down with other people that folks respect, teachers and, first responders and people like that, which is probably a more appropriate place to put veterans, in my opinion, in terms of cultural regard. But what it means to me is that, like, we as a society are always sort of sorting out our feelings about patriotism and about what patriotism is. And it should be, like everything else, an ongoing conversation, and not sort of a consistent belief in patriotism as only one thing.
And I want to go into some of these posts by Donald Trump, but that is the tension, of course, in Bruce Springsteen's song "Born in the USA," with the ballads of "Born in the USA," and then I was, telling my family yesterday, I said, listen to the lyrics of what he's talking about, though, in the song. It's the song that's the number one put out there whenever there is this performative patriotism, but embedded in this is a factory worker who's sent off to war in Vietnam, who comes back and basically can't find a job.
And can't get the help he needs at the VA either. It's a big part of the song.
And so when people are singing that on 4th of July too, it reflects, though, I think, everything that we're talking about here now, but ultimately where you got to be rooted is an authenticity. You got to be, you got to be rooted in, okay, well, what are you actually doing? And I saw this appearance over the weekend by Pete Buttigieg. We're going to talk later in the show about Ron DeSantis's ridiculous campaign and ads. And he had some anti-LGBTQ ad where, as part of the anti-LGBTQ ad, he had this commercial of all of these like oiled up bodybuilders, and that's what DeSantis was like. And so Buttigieg is like, strange way to show your masculinity there, because he goes, but I digress there. What policies are you doing? What are you actually helping? What are you doing? He's like, I wake up. Do I get it right all the time? No, but I wake up and I'm very, very serious about trying to help the American people. We're trying to build infrastructure. We're trying to deal with issues. And frankly, right now, do I agree with Democrats on everything? No. Do I agree with President Biden on everything? No. If President Biden were to post one QAnon meme, he would lose my support, because I have standards in my politics. I would say that person can't be a leader. But right now, the Democrats, the Democratic Party, the pro-democracy coalition that is embodied in that, are the only people speaking intelligently and trying to solve the problems and doing things. And so, like, look, this is Trump's first post on July 4th. This is what he posts. He reposts some random account called Andrea at God Bless Trump 47. So you see there, that's a repost from him. And by the way, the fact that he even calls this platform Truth Social, a throwback to Pravda from the Soviet Union days, is in and of itself dystopian. And then you look at this image that he's reposting. And the image says, United We Stand, and it's a photo of Trump from some event that's probably photoshopped. But if you look at the bottom right of it, it has hashtag WWG1WGA. That is the QAnon slogan, where we go one, we go all.
Wow.
That's Donald Trump's.
See, I'm learning stuff.
That's Donald Trump's first July 4th post. And he has posted QAnon memes, QAnon accounts, not like QAnon adjacent. Although even when people say QAnon adjacent is a bit like of a weird
Yeah.
kind of phrasing. You mean they're a QAnon cult follower, but he's posted over 500 QAnon memes, reposts, really over the past 18 months since Truth Social went live on that platform. And this is just an example of it. He's not going to retract that. He's not going to take it down. No large media networks other than us are actually going to cover this. But his first post is a QAnon meme, a death cult that believes that Trump is going to seize power, become an emperor, and engage in public executions on Capitol Hill. That's his first post. I'll show you his second post, then I'll ask you to.
Well, before we even, I want to talk about the QAnon thing with Trump for a second, because I was thinking about, like, the guy has a pretty large lead in the polls, right? And so it is sort of odd that he remains very extreme. And I was thinking about, like, how this happened, because it made sense is a strong term, but when he was really, really falling, and it really seemed, a few months ago, it really seemed like, oh, Trump was on the outs, right? His base seemed to be getting smaller and smaller, and he just, it made some sense. It was like, okay, he's retreating into the extremes because that's what he has. But now he sort of seems to have survived all that, and he's still like above 50% in a crowded field in a lot of these polls. And it's like he went into the dark tunnel, and then when he came out, like, he was changed. Like, I think he went from, like, these are the only people who seem to still be with me during, like, the his walk in the wilderness politically, to, like, now I'm no longer in the wilderness, but I'm this person now. Like, I bought into it, which is really scary, because he's the front runner for the nomination on the Republican side.
If you go back to this individual historically, and there's a lot of trends, from criminality to his malignant narcissism, and the idiocracy and just the bankruptcies over and over and over again. What the cult plays into and what he buys into, in my view, is exactly what all of the authoritarians know about him. And frankly, it's what Hillary Clinton said. If you can bait him with a tweet, just imagine what Vladimir Putin can do. But you see, it's more than just bait. It's you can play him.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can play him like a fiddle. And so the cult stuff plays to this view that he feels in his malignant narcissistic mind that he holds all of the answers, only he can solve it. And the only people who give him that unadulterated assurance that the absurdity of his malignant narcissism is validated is WWGW1GA. We love you. We love you. His vision for America, and he's been saying it his whole life. He's been constrained but from implementing it. He tried to destroy and continues to try to destroy our checks and balances and our Constitution, which just freaking barely survived the stress test. And that stress test is being tested once again. But why does he love Kim Jong-un? Because they treat him like the cult followers treat him here. Why does he love President Xi? Because he perceives, at least, that that's how people view him. That's why he goes, President Xi, they call him the king. He is the king. I said, you are the king, President. It's the idiot, it's the dumbest speeches in the world that he gives. But what he's telling us is that that's what he wants. Like, we should listen to him when he says it, because he's telling us who he is, Jason.
Yeah, parents out there, like, hug your children until you tell them you love them, because if Trump's dad had just done that, it would spare us so much trouble. Like, I mean, his, like, constant search for unconditional affection. Whatever his name was, Fred Trump, was that like, he really screwed us all by not just being affectionate toward his son. Anyway.
Well, and then you have a modern day Republican Party enablers, whether they're just frankly unqualified idiots who view this as their path to power. People like Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Taylor Greens and Jim Jordans and that crew, or you have kind of the country club Republican. Well, he'll lower my taxes, so whatever. He's not, Bill Barr kind of style, whatever. I'll let it happen. Well, guess what, Bill Barr? Now you're a freaking rhino. Now he's coming for you. Now you're a Marxist. You're a communist combined with fascist. They just throw these terms around, and you're now considered that. And as we know, they will come for you. And that's why it's critical that shows like yours, Majority 54, others here on the MeidasTouch Network continue, though, to just let people know. We did a great video earlier this morning on the MeidasTouch Network where we talk about former Republicans, people who are truly conservative, not this MAGA Republican where we go one, we go all QAnon nonsense. Independents, people non-affiliated with political parties say, you know what? Do I agree with Democrats and everything? No, but I ain't ever going back to this modern day Republican Party mess. And look, while the Democrats have their flaws, we know what they are. And again, it would be weird if we were like, hey, they're perfect in everything. That would be cult-like. We're not. We will criticize them at the appropriate times all the time. But this modern-day MAGA Republican Party, I mean, you remember when a vice president spelled potato wrong, and it was like, you're done. You are out of here. Your reputation, you are done. Never again in politics. Now you got the leader of this party who this is what he says. This is his other 4th of July message. He's responding to this account that says 81 million votes. And I've never seen a pro-Biden hat, shirt, or flag in my life. And Donald Trump responds, true. No Biden hats anywhere. Never seen one. Never seen a Biden hat. That is the type of, or this other post by Donald Trump, lying that he gets bigger crowds than Elvis. This whole thing with, it's a photo of him next to Elvis and he's reposting it, or this other meme that he makes of himself talking about performative patriotism. This is a photo. I mean, just look at this. Like this stuff is crazy, Jason Kander. And like, we have to talk about it in those terms. Okay.
Well,
crazy.
What gets me about it is like, there's this part of me that, doing this show every week that almost wants to shame myself for talking about Trump so much, because I'm like, come on, like move on. But then I remember the dude's going to be the Republican nominee. Like, I mean, I'm just talking about the guy who's going to be and it's like, we're all tired of talking about him. We're all those things. And then part of me is like, I feel like this shame, like, am I being like the folks in the media who bring up Trump because it clicks? And then I remember, no, like the dude is going to be the Republican nominee. And that's why he's getting talked about right now. And that's so damned troubling. And to your point about like, it used to be a scandal, like when somebody misspelled potato, isn't potato one of those words that like there's an E in it when it's plural, I think. And it's like, that's confusing. Like we were too hard on politicians before is my point. Like and now like
potatoes.
Yeah. And now anything goes, so like, it's like we've gone from like politicians can make the slightest little mistake to like, and then be basically done, to like some politicians can't make a mistake. And the thing with like the, red hats, I do think that, thinking back to 2016, we panned a lot of like the Trump voters as like, I think we clearly underestimated them. And I think, while on the one hand, clearly Trump and his people like to play with the metrics. They like to choose metrics as they go along. This week we're going to do crowd size. Next week we're going to do this, because they want to always be, generating false momentum. But at the same time, like, I do think we have to be realistic about the fact that like, it's true. Joe Biden is not Barack Obama. Like, there are not a lot of people drawn to the movement because of Joe Biden. They are drawn to voting for Joe Biden because of Joe Biden. But there is something to constantly monitor there, which is an enthusiasm gap. And it is what frightens me about the whole thing. Like, particularly living here, like 4th of July, there's an awful lot of people that I saw out there sporting their Trump gear as 4th of July attire. And I didn't see, and I'm not saying that it necessarily matters in terms of how people show up to vote, but it can matter in terms of how people show up to volunteer and that kind of thing. So it's a good moment for people listening to sort of gut check, what is your level of enthusiasm for the 2024 elections? Is it enough? And are you doing enough to bring other people into volunteering and into being active? Because that's how you get beat, is by not keeping an eye on that sort of thing.
And you can't lose enthusiasm. And to me, there is a difference, though, of being in a cult, making your entire identity, I love Donald Trump, I love Donald Trump, and separately being enthusiastic for for your democracy and doing everything you can to be helpful. I talk about it a lot, but whenever I'm offered to go speak at some event of people who are making who are putting postcards or canvassing, I'll always say, almost always, if I'm free, I will always say yes to it. And I did one recently in Santa Clarita here in California, 27th congressional district. Mike Garcia, MAGA Republican, has that seat, a very flippable seat, and I saw enthusiasm there. Look, and these are people who aren't going to go to rallies. They're not going to wear Biden hats. They're not going to wear
busy volunteering, which is good.
And they're busy people. They're going about their day. But what we can't take for granted is our democracy. And I think people took for granted, including me, our democracy in 2016. I voted for Hillary Clinton, but when I was driving back from the deposition I was headed out that day, I was so overconfident that people were going to do the right thing and Clinton was going to win. And I took for granted those Obama years, which if I just go back, don't get me wrong, there was not all, it was not all peaches during the Obama administration. But even when I go back and I think about like a song will come on from that time, or I'll look at a video from that time of just things happening, or I'll look at photographs of that time. And then I think to myself, like, politically, what was going on? Where was I? I get filled with all of these emotions because things were actually it was truly a different time. And I guess sometimes people say, well, back then in my day, it was different, but it was truly a different time. Things felt far more normal. And then I get this sinking feeling of how Donald Trump, this historical grifter, this person who's bankrupted everything he's touched. Everybody in New York and New Jersey knew how this guy screwed over all of the workers, never paid his bills, bankrupted everything he touched, how he ravaged and attacked our country. And for me, people are like, oh, you talk about Trump all the time on the MeidasTouch Network. It's for I hope I never have to talk about this guy again, but it is a point of comparison. And I think a critical point of comparison, right? We have two major political parties right now. That's the system that we have right now. So there's got to be some basis of comparison. So when we do the videos, when we have these conversations, we compare them. So like, let's just pull up what was President Biden talking about on the 4th of July. Like, compare Donald Trump's post, and let's just pull up anyone at random. We've helped create millions of new jobs, passed historic legislation to lower costs for families, and seen millions of small business applications across the country, all while the unemployment rate has remained at historic lows. Let's keep it going. Here's another one that he says about troops. As we celebrate our nation this 4th of July, I'm thinking of the countless service members who sacrifice so much to keep us safe. We will always be in debt to those who defend our nation and our democracy around the world. And to think that posts like this trigger people, this makes people on the right angry. They get pissed at that person.
I mean, at the end of the day, those posts are just boring, and that's like what we're rooting for, right? Like, it's for the president, just like say usual regular president stuff, like just go do president things. Don't do like WWE heel stuff. Like, just just don't talk about haters and losers. Just do, regular president 4th of July stuff. And hopefully, at the end of the day, most people will prefer that.
And that, look, and what we have to do, what we have to talk about on this network, though, is what the large media networks also refuse to talk about. Things like the fact that the United States is the fastest growing GDP of all G7 nations. We're number one. And in terms of inflation, the lowest inflation of all other G7 nations in the world, and the fastest decrease of inflation as compared to all G7 nations. Okay, to be the number one GDP of all G7 nations and then have MAGA Republicans go like, we hate Bidenomics, is like watching the World Cup winner hold the World Cup and then basically be like, man, they sucked. They were the losers, right? No, they won the World Cup.
Yeah.
They were the number one in the world. What other basis of comparison do you want? Do you want to have? We have so much more.
Well, I was just, before we go into that, I was going to say, introducing the term Bidenomics over the last couple of weeks has just been like a brilliant thing to do. To just like put it out as if it's always been a term that we've used. I've really appreciated that move. I thought it was pretty pro.
I want to hear you break that down. I also want to talk about the Trump SPAC entering into an $18 million settlement agreement with the SEC that Donald Trump is refusing to sign, although the SPAC saying, we did it, we're happy to sign it. So as usual, a complete cluster, everything involving Donald Trump. Let's talk about Bidenomics. Let's talk about Trump fraud after this quick break.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. There's been plenty of times in my life when I thought, you know what, it would be good to check in with my therapist, particularly over the last few years, because that's when I started seeing a therapist. And I can just tell you that it has worked extremely well for me. Sometimes in life, we're faced with these tough choices and the path forward just isn't clear. My wife and I have a rule, actually, which is that if one of us says to the other, I think you should make an appointment with your therapist, we don't get to argue about it. It's not like debatable. It's just like, okay, you have to do it, which means we're pretty sparing about when we say it. But when we do, it just means you got to go make an appointment. And I'm always happy that I did. In fact, oftentimes I feel better as soon as I made the appointment, and then I feel even better when I have the appointment. So, we're very excited as a result to have BetterHelp as a sponsor. Continue to be excited about it. And if it's something that you've never tried before, therapy that is, this is a great way to try it. If it's something you've had good experience with and you're in between therapists, another good reason to try it. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/M54 today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/M54. As anybody who listens to this show knows, I've been drinking AG1 for quite a while now, like a few years. In fact, it replaced what I used to take, like a multivitamin. I used to take a few things, and now I don't take any of that. I just drink AG1 in the morning. And I'll be honest, there was a stretch here recently where I just, you get out of a routine, and with getting the kids ready in the morning and everything, I got out of my routine of drinking my AG1 first thing in the morning, and it kind of messed me up for a few days. And then I realized, I was like, oh, why do I feel kind of off? And then I remembered, oh, it's because I haven't been drinking my AG1 first thing in the morning like I usually do. And I got right back to it, and boom, felt right back in my routine. It's like, personally for me, not only is it great because you get your AG1 first thing in the morning, and that gives you all sorts of energy, makes you feel good. But on top of that, the bonus is it means you're hydrating first thing in the morning. And like, if you live here in the middle of the country where it's 1,000 degrees in the summer, like, that is a particularly helpful thing to do. So if you're looking for a simpler, effective investment for your health, try AG1 and get 5 free AG1 travel packs and a free 1-year supply of vitamin D with your first purchase. So go to drinkag1.com/majority. That's drinkag1.com/majority. Check it out. Okay, Ben, this SPAC and Trump social stuff seems important, and I don't understand it. I'm like, I'm a recovering lawyer who no longer even has to go to continuing legal education or anything, and my license is like in a dustbin somewhere. So I assume you have tracked this. Will you teach us what is happening here?
Sure. So a SPAC stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Company, sometimes referred to as a blank check company. It is just simply a way to bring a private company public. Think about it as two different roads to go in public. I'm oversimplifying things. One road is this rigorous IPO process, a private company that's been around for a long time with a balance sheet and revenue and EBITDA and projections, matures to the point where it's going to the public markets, where the SEC says, you know what? You've been around for a long time. We're okay if you list as a public company. We trust you now, but you have to go through these rigorous steps. So the SPAC is an alternative route, and the route is this entity that goes public, then has to find a target company, which is a private company, to bring it public. In theory, the SPAC sponsor is supposed to be a group of very qualified financial people, and they're not allowed to have any communications with the target company before they go public. They're simply telling investors, hey, we're super qualified financial people. Give us a bunch of your money. We're going to go out on this journey together, and we're going to find a company, and we're going to bring that company public. Now, the IPO has been around for a while. It has financials. It goes through this rigorous process. In the blank check company, it's just that. Blank check investors will find that qualified company and bring it public. But if there were communications that predate the blank check company going public, well, then it's viewed as, well, you're basically just trying to do an end run around the IPO process. You just go through that process. So in this, the SEC says no pre-communications can take place before the SPAC goes public. Then we're all on this journey together. Then provide the shareholders with information about your journey, and then the shareholders can then vote. And if they don't like your target, they get all of their money back, basically.
Okay.
But one of the problems with SPACs, though, is that if there is, to use a word that's, in the parlance a lot, collusion that's taking place with the SPAC, the go public company, and its target before, you could potentially be bringing very bad companies that never deserve to go public in the first place. And so why the SEC's been so concerned about SPACs is, well, we've got this well-regulated IPO process, but we're not really getting sophisticated sponsors finding sophisticated private companies and bringing them public. We're having we're seeing often people with very little financial experience finding companies that never deserve to be public. And then you overhype it, you oversell it, you promote the crap out of it unlawfully, and you bring that stock price up super high because it's supposed to trade at $10 a share.
Yeah.
And then you basically becomes a pump and dump type scheme. So that's what the SEC is afraid of. And what seems to have taken place here is everything the SEC wants to guard against, right? That the sponsor, Digital World Acquisition Company, founded by this guy, Patrick Orlando, was having communications with people in Trump's world. One of them, we know, it's a whistleblower, a guy by the name of Will Wilkerson, who's left Trump Media and has told the SEC and DOJ, we were breaking the law at Trump Media, come after us. So a Trump person from Trump Media was saying we broke the law. So these communications took place when they weren't supposed to. In fact, a lot of people got the insider information and made huge fortunes right before it went public because they knew this was going to be a Trump SPAC. So huge fortunes were made. The SPAC goes public. It announces its merger. The stock price goes whoosh, through the roof. Everybody's talking about it in Trump world. Trump's posting about it. Everyone's talking about Truth Social this, Truth Social that. So the price goes up to like 175. And everybody's putting their life savings in this thing. And where's the stock trading at now? basically $12, almost $10 a share. So then whoosh, everybody lost their life savings. And I was saying this from the beginning because in my legal career, it's not like I just woke up one day and go, oh, I know what a SPAC is. I know the SPAC regime and the structure because I've worked with SPACs before, the ones that work the way they're actually supposed to work, which if you don't find the right merger partner, you just shut it down, you dissolve. So it was fairly obvious to me what was going on here. So the SEC opened an investigation, the DOJ opened an investigation, because this stuff is not just a violation of securities law, civil, where you can have cease and desist orders, monetary, but it's criminal. We learned last week the DOJ unsealed an indictment of 3 individuals for insider trading who, before the SPAC went public, they were saying, aha, we got the Trump SPAC. They made like $22 million on this insider trading. So that's what was going down. That's one of the things the SEC and the DOJ are investigating. And here in this settlement agreement, what's basically happening is the SPAC, not Trump Media. Remember, Trump Media, SPAC are supposed to merge. Trump Media is the target company. The SPAC finds the target company. And by the way, one of the biggest red flags to me, I digress for a second, but it's important. Trump Media didn't even exist when the SPAC was announced. So how could you be merging with a company that didn't exist, has no financials whatsoever, not even 1 year of looking back financials, no EBITDA whatsoever, isn't making money? And in the S1 filing, which is the initial SPAC go public filing, Digital World Acquisition Company said it was looking for a company valued at $400 million to $2 billion. You know how much money Donald Trump values Truth Social at in his latest campaign financial disclosures? Between $5 and $25 million. So the company says it's looking for $1 billion. Digital World Acquisition Company says it's looking for $1 billion company. Trump is reporting that the company's worth $5 to $25 million, because he deflates his assets when it, so that's what he's doing on his. So that was one of the biggest red flags to me. But here, Digital World Acquisition Company, the SPAC, is saying, look, SEC, we, the SPAC, will enter into this settlement agreement with you. Under Section 5.2 of our definitive merger agreement with Trump Media, we actually, their approval is required for any settlement with you above $100,000, but they cannot unreasonably withhold their consent. And in essence, what the SPAC is saying is Trump is unreasonably withholding his consent to enter into the settlement agreement. But the SPAC, Digital World Acquisition Company, is saying under Section 5.2, we fulfilled our requirements, we believe. So if Trump wants to sue us, he can sue us. If they want to dissolve the SPAC, but we're going to enter into this settlement, we believe we did the criteria. Now, last point. Why doesn't Trump want to sign the settlement agreement? Because in essence, he would be stipulating to the fraud. There's still criminal exposure taking place. And Trump does what Trump always does. He throws everybody under the bus. So the SPAC was great when he thought it was going to make him billions of dollars. But now when the SPAC is admitting that it violated anti-fraud provisions in concert with Trump Media, Donald Trump's like, nope, it was all you. It was all you. Now, we don't have any quotes or stories of Donald Trump saying, nope, it was all you. But if you read SEC filings the way I do, you know that's exactly what is taking place in those filings. So there you have it, SPAC 101.
It's very helpful. I didn't know any of that stuff. It is incredible. 2 things. One, how many different things he is involved with just operate outside the law from the jump. Not like, oh, things got out of hand and it was one thing after another, and next thing we knew, we were outside the law. Yeah, but we started outside the lines and we stayed outside the lines the whole time because we don't recognize the lines. And then the other thing is I don't know, I've been reading lately just stuff about how he's telling people he may start using Twitter again. And it's like he's got his own social media company and he can't help but be such a fair weather fan that he's just like, I'm ready to just abandon that thing.
I just think too. So the former CEO of the SPAC resigned, Patrick Orlando. Patrick Orlando then set up a $6 million shady loan from the island of Dominica to keep Truth Social going. That, as far as I know, was never disclosed to investors. At every aspect of this thing, there is wrongdoing, cutting corners, and potential criminality. And that basically defines everything he does. And then this isn't being talked about a lot because we're focused a lot on these MAGA Republicans in the House going after Mayorkas and Merrick Garland and Biden, but they have launched, the MAGA Republicans on the financial committees have launched investigations into the head of the SEC. They're trying to get the head of the SEC fired. You're improperly targeting Donald Trump. You're going after Trump. And it's like, no, he's just breaking the freaking law.
Yeah.
No one's going, just stop with the crap. It's just follow the law. Law and order means something. And it goes back to this theme of this episode, performative. Yeah, I mean, you want to go out there and say, law and order, we support the police, thin blue line, but your actions are the exact opposite. You screw over the cops. You screw over law and order. You screw over you're the defund party. You're the abolish party.
All right, from screwing over to screwing up, let's talk about Ron DeSantis for a minute. All I can say is this is like on this show, Ravi and I have been constantly telling people not to underestimate Ron DeSantis. I still think I believe that, but I'm starting to become open to the idea that people were properly estimating Ron DeSantis because this dude he's kind of had his moment now a few times and he keeps coming up pretty short. And I know we talked a little earlier about, his odd attempt to gain attention by, like a child that acts out, like that kid in class who doesn't exactly know how to socialize with the other kids. So he hits them, and he's not like an angry kid. Maybe in this case he is, but he just doesn't know another way to relate. And I feel like that was sort of what DeSantis was doing with this video. It's like, I got to get attention somehow. But really, the dude has fallen flat, big time. You have a thing here about the betting markets, which I hate to admit how accurate they tend to be. And they have Gavin Newsom, I guess, in a better position to, a guy who's not running and whose party has an incumbent in the White House, a better chance really of being president than Ron DeSantis right now. That doesn't seem good if you're Ron DeSantis.
I think it sounds really bad if you're Ron DeSantis.
I mean, I actually went to look at this betting market that you brought up, and it's got me in it, and it's got me at 100. So let's see. Let's go back to where does it have? Yeah, I mean, it's got me 6 points below Ron DeSantis, and I'm a podcast host now and a Little League coach. So that doesn't seem good for him.
Well, misstep after misstep after misstep. And he rode the coattails of Trump. And you really can't exist in a cult and then challenge your cult leader number one. And if you're going to then challenge your cult leader, you better go for the knockout punch. Right. You can't go after the cult leader and just be like, well, I kind of agree with the cult leader. He's like, all right, but maybe you should pick. He's a cult leader. Like DeSantis, you did a freaking video for your 2018 campaign of teaching your kids to build the wall. Remember his campaign? It was we love Donald Trump here so much so that we're reading our kids books about Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said that there will be light, and let's build the wall, son. That was actually the ad that he run. So, the one thing that Donald Trump, basically says about DeSantis, well, it says that's accurate in general, but about DeSantis is Trump made this guy. DeSantis was not going to be the governor. There was there was one of the undersecretaries, I forget of which position, of the person who was always expected to be the governor, who was crushing DeSantis. Donald Trump, basically gave DeSantis, the cosign. DeSantis rode that all the way up. And then DeSantis, if you're going to go after Trump, you just got to go after the guy, the way Chris Christie is. That's the only way you could run a campaign like this. You got to do the Chris Christie, go after him. But to say, hey, I think his policies are great. He's a good policy, and he talks with his mouth, like, and then there's just all of the weirdness of the guy. Like, to your point, it's like he's never been taught the basic social cues. So the story of him with pudding fingers in a vacuum doesn't make sense. So like, you go, okay, he eats pudding with 3 fingers and like slobs it all over his mouth. Like, you're like, that's weird, but like, I don't really understand it. But then when he engages in all of the other conduct that he does, like, he doesn't know how to eat a pizza. He laughs before the joke is even told. He wipes his boogers. He wipes his boogers on people. So you go over all of those things. And then I thought, and I called this, like, if you go back, to the tweet that I put up right before DeSantis announced on Twitter, I was like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. Elon Musk can barely get through an interview. Elon Musk cannot deliver an interview. So you're going to do Twitter, which is crazy glitchy. You're going to do something that's on like the Twitter voice conversation feature, which is like hard to even figure out. With Elon, I'm like, it's going to malfunction. Elon can't hold the conversation. It's going to be weird. And that, to me, set the tone of this complete and utter failure. But, here's the thing. People are going to look back at the DeSantis years in Florida. History's not going to be kind to what he's done. Florida is a great state with great people, with a lot of hope, and it should be relatively easy to deliver good things to good people in one of the greatest states. Yet DeSantis managed to use that power, turn it into this like fascist, angry, hateful thing, take away people's freedoms, and they are going to see the results of it. The results of some of these policies don't show up right away, right? Like, you're going to see the results of all of these failures 5-10 years from now, and then the Republicans say, oh, see, the Democrats did it. The Democrats did it.
That's
and
100% what they're going to do. There'll be a Democratic governor possibly by then, or even if
trying
there's
to
not,
fix it.
they'll blame a Democratic president. Yeah, I think the whole theory of DeSantis has been, and Brett said this before we went on the air, that he would be Trump without all the baggage. But it's like, yes, but also without, whether you like it or not, without any personality. Like, I mean, Trump is a lot of things, but he's not boring, and I'm not saying that makes him good. I'm just saying, like, we've spent the last 56 minutes talking about the dude because he's evil, but also because he's not boring and he's constantly out there making it so that he's being talked about. And DeSantis is pretty boring, it turns out. And so, yeah, he didn't have any of the baggage, but he also doesn't have any of the other stuff Republicans like. So he had his moment, man. It was right there for the taking, and it appears to me that window is very close to closing for him. So
Seems
before
very close to closing.
Yeah. But anyway, that said, before we finish this off, we should talk about these major Supreme Court rulings. I'm going to throw it back to you because you're the lawyer, and I'm the guy who used to play a lawyer in real life. And I'll let you talk about these for a second.
Well, you got this case, right? This 303 Creative LLC versus Ellenis, which challenged this anti-discrimination law in Colorado, which says businesses can't discriminate against people. And somebody, her name is Lori Smith, sounds like a fake name even, like Jane Doe created a fake web design company. She's never designed a website in her life, yet she says, I'm thinking about starting a web design company. She files a lawsuit against Colorado, the state of Colorado, because she wants to put a sign on her hypothetical store and on her website saying, we discriminate against gay couples here. And then she claims a day after I filed that lawsuit in 2016, just so people know how long these cases take. The case was originally filed in 2016. She got an inquiry from, miraculously, a gay couple. And someone named Stewart wanted a person who's never designed a website to spend thousands of dollars and design this website. And she goes, oh, based on my religion, I am so offended by this. And so it turns out also that She used someone's real name, at least, or there's a real name of this Stewart person. But Stewart's like, I am not gay. I'm straight. I've been married for 15 years. I'm a graphic designer, so I would never need somebody to even make me a website. And why would I go to someone who's never designed a website in their life to make me a website? But on that basis, the Supreme Court said that this hypothetical business has a First Amendment right when it operates in the public. It's not a private club, in the public, to discriminate and say, we don't want gay couples here. And just think about how dangerous that extension is to, to other areas. It's incredibly dangerous. But here you have these kind of right-wing groups that are bringing up to the Supreme Court, these Federalist Society groups bring to the Supreme Court these like hypothetical things. And as a law student, you know this from law school, like, there's got to be standing, Article 3 standing. There's got to be injury. Like, there has to be real cases. And so not only do we see the Supreme Court overturning its precedent, they're just ruling on things where there's absolutely no standing. I mean, there could be, my view is I'm very supportive of President Biden's student debt cancellation program. But wherever your view on the case is, there was absolutely no standing in that case as well. And the Supreme Court basically found that because Missouri, Mohella, as you know, which collects student debt,
Higher Education Loan Authority.
Even though Mohella wasn't the group that brought it, the state of Missouri was the one who filed it on behalf of Mohella. They said, well, that's enough standing. And even though the statute gives the Secretary of Education the ability for waivers and modifications of student loans, Congress should have predicted when it created the HEROES Act in 2003 that COVID-19 was going to exist. And it doesn't specifically mention COVID-19. So it's a violation of separation of power. So you have them just ignoring the text, ignoring precedent, and coming up with fake standing, as lawyers, it is deeply, deeply problematic. We've done deeper dives. So I'm not going to rehash all of the deeper dives we've done here on the MeidasTouch Network, but you can go and look at many of the videos and the last episode of Legal AF. I see a lot of people throwing out emojis. Throw out a Popak emoji so I could send it to him. I always love when everyone does the Popak emojis. Become a member of the MeidasTouch YouTube channel by hitting the $sign below. You can access all of the emojis. That's one of the ways we build this independent media platform. We don't have any outside investors. Make sure you subscribe to Majority 54, not just here on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. Search Majority 54. It's super easy. You will love the discussion between Jason Kander and Ravi Gupta when I'm not on here. It's a slightly, I'm just going to be honest, a slightly different perspective than probably some of the other Meidas shows, but I think an important perspective, and make sure you check out Majority 54 there as well. And check out store.meidastouch.com for the best pro-democracy gear. A lot of breaking news that I got to catch up to, Jason Kander, and I got to report on. Final words for you.
Thanks for doing this week. And I hope Ravi is having a great time in Italy. I'm sure that he is. He's pretty good at that. Thanks for stepping in. You're a pro at this, and you made it easy on me. So for everybody else, remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.
Chat.